defeat Putin. For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power.
We came, we saw, he died.
We both agree that Assad needs to go.
You know, fuck the EU.
And yeah, we are live. Hello, everybody. Hello, Saksarbat. Long time no see you. Have a good afternoon today. So yeah, today the video is in English, as you might suspect. I'll have today again Nikola Mirkovic. I will not be able to do the same introduction as Nina did last time. It was an amazing introduction, and I'm terrible with that. And you all know that I barely can repeat a full sentence that I have programmed before. So yeah, today we're going to make episode 2 of the series of videos that I have planned, that is Prelude to World War, or Prelúdio à Guerra Mundial. And today we're going to look a little bit on the perspective of France on those matters. And well, I don't think I'm going to extend myself any longer. Without further ado, let me bring Nikola Mirkovic. And I forgot to put Nikola on the right place. So I have to come here. Yeah, here it is. Nikola Mirkovic.
Hi, Marcelo. Hello, everybody.
Bonjour. Comment ça va, monsieur?
Ça va très bien, merci. Un peu chaud.
Très bien. Un peu chaud. C'est très chaud. C'est vraiment très chaud ici en Italie. Bon, ça va bien. Ça va bien. C'est mieux que le frais.
Oui, c'est sûr.
Le froid.
Exactement.
Well, hello, Nicola. How are you doing?
Hi there.
Back to English. It's still the word language, the word most spoken language, more or less.
Yeah.
So the idea today, I have kind of briefed you before a little bit on the idea. The idea is to have the idea of the environment of the countries before world wars or big wars. So in the case of France, we could include Napoleonic. We don't have to go that further, but we can understand more or less how the environment of France was during the period. Of course, having some idea about Germany and, everyone that was around France. One of the things that I always see during these periods is some, vacuum of power. Mm-hmm. Which is, you see this during the Bolshevik Revolution. You see a weak Tsar. You see this before the French Revolution. You see a weak king or emperor. Basically, you see this before any type of revolutions, and especially any type of wars. It's, potato. It's more or less the same thing, just with countries instead of people. So I will leave you free to start where you want. If you want to start on World War One, or if you want to point out some special moment that you believe it's important for the understanding, and of course bringing this and draw some parallels with what we have today, what we're seeing today. A weak president of the most powerful country on the planet, a weak establishment in Europe, and people going cuckoo. So, what do you? How do you see this in the past and with today?
France is a very old country, old nation, and France has been to war. One of the countries who's been the most to war, because it is an old country. It's been a very strong power for a long time, for centuries, on the European continent. France was, I would say, started out in the 5th century, a very big country, and Europe at that time, countries would wage a lot of wars. So until, I would say, the beginning of the 20th century, going to war was something every generation of French had done practically. Even, I mean, we could go even to prehistoric times, but starting the moment when Clovis became the king of the Franks. And since that time, French have always been to war, as all the other European people. I mean, this is not something new to Europe. So going to war was something was quite, which was unfortunately, I mean, quite normal. And Thucydide said that wars, I mean, wars is the normal thing, that peace times are just like some sort of they're an armistice between wars, and that the normal thing is that we fight. So there are so many wars we can analyze in France, and most of these wars are actually waged. I mean, the way we've waged them have changed. I mean, we had at one moment chivalry with, civilian population, which were not supposed to be touched. There was practically no such thing as an attack on civilians. This is something that in the code of honor of chivalry, French would not do it, as the German chivalry or the Spanish chivalry. Nobody would do that. Those were things that there were red lines that people wouldn't cross, and civilians was something like that. And then starting with, I mean, practically with the Napoleonic Wars and then First World War, we saw a lot of these attacks and the civilians getting more and more, I would say, involved. And actually, the idea, something which changed a lot in France concerning armies, was with the French Revolution, where there were conscripts, and we would tell the French that they had to go to the army, whether they were noblemen or not. They had to go fight. They had to go fight for the Republic, then for the Empire, then again for the Republic. And this is something which changed quite a lot in the French mentality, the fact that they're starting to fight for a nation. This was nothing new. Before there was a kingdom, then there was a nation after the French Revolution, then for the ideas of the French Revolution. And something which I've learned in my historical research on France is that there's been, I mean, a big wound which still hasn't mended even up today, and the French still don't agree between themselves. I mean, they've always been fighting since, I mean, anybody who's read Asterix and Obelix, I mean, the best thing that French do is fight between each other. I mean, a lot of people do that, but French are really experts in that, in fighting between each other. But the French still haven't got over the French Revolution. And at that time, really, we started seeing that there are different perceptions of what France is, which was probably not the case before the French Revolution, where everything was quite local, that we didn't have the communication that we have today. And there wasn't this idea that I'm going to die for an idea. I'm going to die for my family. I'm going to die for my God. I'm going to die for my land, for sure. But for an idea, people just really didn't care before. I mean, I would think that people from the medieval ages, if they heard us speaking about left and right, they would say, this is irrelevant to them. They would discuss on a specific topic and they would disagree or agree on that topic. But I don't think they would put maybe you think they may go, they might have been split. I don't know. But definitely this ideology coming into the French society. And the fact that French were starting to fight in the Napoleonic Wars to spread an idea of what freedom was, of what equality was, of what liberty was. And this was something quite new. And the French didn't all agree on this fact that they had to go to war for that. And actually, when there was the Vendéan Revolution, counter-revolution, that was during the French Revolution, around at the end of the 18th century, after the Bastille in 1789, the reason why the west of France, there was an uprising, they were extremely Catholic. They were against the revolution and the ideas of the revolution but the reason they went to fight the French army at that time is that they did not want to be enrolled in the French army to go fight against the Prussians. So this is actually quite interesting.
So basically they wanted to fight because they didn't want to fight.
Yeah, exactly. They went to war against Les Bleus, against the military of the French Revolution. Because they were against it, but I mean they remained more or less peaceful, and they voiced their concern. They wanted the king. They were very shocked by the fact that the revolutionaries had cut the head off of the king. But the reason what sparked the spark which led to this huge unrest in the Vendée and in Brittany and in some parts of Normandy was because at that moment the ideologists behind the French Revolution said, you must go fight for officially our ideology, and not for your land, not for your king, not for your God, for the ideology. And this is something which is quite interesting because this has become the norm in a lot of the wars that we've had since then, at least for the French, that, okay, we're going to start fighting for an ideology. Again, we've seen it in the 20th century and the 21st century. France goes to humanitarian wars. We don't fight for petroleum, we don't fight for gas, we don't fight for natural resources. We fight for democracy. We fight for human rights. We fight against big, bad, ugly dictators, and for the poor people who are suffering. And this idea has really entrenched itself in the I would say in the political in the politics of French society, that we are no longer this country just as we did at old times. The French used to fight. Okay, they wanted land, they wanted minerals, they wanted iron. They didn't say, we're going to go fight these people because they have access to the sea and we don't, or they have access to iron or to ore or to I don't know whatever, and we don't. So they would be more, I would say, more honest. At the end, they were still fighting. There was still war. It was still terrible, but they were more honest on the reasons why they were doing this. What's interesting is that.
Let me just make a parenthesis here. There's one thing that Alexander Mercury's always mentioned is that from the Durand, he always says that by the time where the British Empire was an empire, they were more honest. They were going to war because they needed more land, because they needed minerals or whatever. They just needed more or wanted more. They wanted to be more richer. And they could just go to war and perhaps lose against, for example, the Zulus, and the queen could have tea with the Zulu king 1 week later on the palace. While now we have a war where the leaders of the countries refuse to talk to the party involved in the war, and I mean, of course, the Putin. They just don't want to talk to the guy. Why not? What is the deal? Because it's the idea. They cannot. The good guys cannot talk to the demon. It's very easy, clear to understand that.
Exactly, and I think we've got such a Manichaean view today on what war is, and we've gotten far away from what the chivalry ideas or this respect that you could have for an adversary, for an enemy. And at the end, they would meet, they would discuss, even they would have had a lot of diplomacy all along while they were fighting. As you said, they would discuss between themselves while they were fighting, whereas we've entered this stage today where it's all black or white, or the good guys and the bad guys, and we don't discuss with them. And this is the death of diplomacy. And actually, France was quite a good country in diplomacy. It helped a lot that France was a big nation in Europe, and then at that time globally in the world. I mean, as France started building its colonies and all that, it has always backed its strength on a very strong diplomacy. And the French also at one time in Europe, all the courts in Europe would speak French. From France to Russia, everybody in the 17th, 18th century was speaking French. So it helps when your language is a language everybody's using to communicate. So you've got maybe a head start on the other countries. But France would have this, and whether it be Mazarin, whether it be Talleyrand. I mean, after Napoleon lost, I mean, France should have disappeared. It could have disappeared. Everybody would have been very happy to split up France. But France used diplomacy, and Talleyrand came and discussed and with the other nations and explained why this would not be a good idea. And they all talked around it, and they found a solution because they were interested in stability and peace. And they all agreed at the end, well, listen, maybe, okay, if you promise you don't invade us and you don't push your revolutionary ideas on us, okay, maybe we could find a way where you can get out safe out of this. You'll have to pay, of course, but you'll get out safe. But it's in our global interest, and we'll see what happens in the next war. But in any case, that's the way. That was that mentality that they had, and we couldn't. It's kind of funny actually when you think about it today, because we're so far from that. We can't imagine that, okay, let's have Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein or even Mohammed Mossadegh in the 1950s in Iran, which was just defending his oil, nobody would discuss with him at that time. So we've gone very far from that stage where people would fight, but they would discuss. And as Clausewitz said, okay, so we haven't been able to discuss. You don't want to give me access to the sea. You don't want to give me your minerals. You don't want to give me your land. Okay, so we'll go fight. And then after that, we still have honor. We still are gentlemen, and we'll discuss. So we've lost that totally. And in those wars, the Napoleonic Wars, I mean, several million people died in Europe. A lot of people died in France as well. It was quite tough. And it's funny to see today Napoleon is still a very admired figure in France because he got France out of the French Revolution. I think a lot of people recognize that. French Revolution was a huge massacre. I mean, it was extremely violent. Even people like Danton or Robespierre, who were real leaders of the French Revolution, and they cut so many heads off. Even they themselves, at the end, they got their own heads cut off. I mean, that was the game. The name of the game is how many heads can we cut off? And so it was gone wild. It was gone wild, and there was probably
even Monsieur Guillotine got his head guillotined.
Yeah, everybody. You know, nobody was safe at that time. It was a scary time for a lot of people, and nobody got out of there easily. So, but there was a necessity to probably get the French monarchy to change, and things could have been done more progressively or moderately. And France went to this revolution again. And so this is passionate thing that the French have about extreme violence, intense violence at one moment, and it went bad. And we had the uprisings in the West. We had uprisings in different cities in France. Lyon wasn't happy with this revolution, other big towns as well. And Napoleon came, and he was a soldier. And that army is still seen as a strong institution in France. And he came as a strong man. And I think this is something which is, compared to your question at the beginning about this vacuum in power, Napoleon filled in this vacuum. He was a small guy, but he had a very strong, I would say, dimension. And he impressed. He impressed, and he arrived at a moment where, again, it's quite astonishing today that France was just not smashed to pieces. I mean, there was no more a king. French were infighting. There were upheavals. Everybody. I mean, a lot of people would have. I mean, the Prussians could have just came in. Austrians could have came in. The English could have, and they didn't. I mean, this is something maybe a lost occasion for them in hindsight. But Napoleon came in and filled this vacuum. And so I'm not the history of all the peoples in the world, but definitely French are attached to strong personalities. And if there's some sort of, I would say, an adhesion at one moment of terrible sorrow, of disarray, and somebody could come and fill that in, and we'll see it later on with Clemenceau during the First World War, with de Gaulle, especially during the Second World War. And if you go back in time, even going back to Charlemagne or Joan of Arc in the 15th century, again, France would have been totally wiped out by the Burgunds and by the English. And there's this figure of Joan of Arc coming out of the east of France and saying, I'm going to lead the battle. And all of France followed Joan of Arc. So it could be a strong man or a strong woman, as it was with Blanche de Castille, again, the mother of Louis IX. The French people, they quit their feuds when a strong person arises above the pack and says, I know where we're going, and you must follow, and you should follow me. And usually these are not people who impose. This is quite interesting again. These are people who have naturally risen to power. And Napoleon filled in that vacuum, and he was followed because he told the French, listen, we're all French now. And there were bad things done during the revolution, and there were good things. And he was more of a revolutionary, but he assured the Catholics, he assured the monarchists that there would be room for everybody in the empire that he was building. And that worked. And that worked. And within the French army, they had the Catholics, they had the Republicans, they had the monarchists, and even though it was an offset of the Republic, they found their own place in this empire. So and so Napoleon, not only did he fix the situation in France while he was there, so he thought that he had to spread this out to the rest of Europe. So that was a catastrophe. That didn't work, as all empires. He went too far too soon, and he thought that just with the French military might, and he was a military genius, there's no doubt about that. But after a while, if you don't take advantage, if that advantage when you are such a military genius, it has to be used on short midterm. If you make it last too long, after a while, your enemies, they'll figure you out. They'll understand what you're doing. They'll understand how you work. They'll find your weaknesses. And that's why most empires, either they crumble from within, and we'll probably talk about that, because that is one of the possibilities of empires, or they'll crumble because of the outside pressure. They have too many enemies around them, and the enemies, they will just liaise together and find that way to make Napoleon lose. And that's what happened in Waterloo, and Napoleon would set off to St. Helena, where he died. So this is actually quite interesting to see in the French history how they can get galvanized by an ideology and go to war. And actually after that, there were still these issues. And getting back to the French Revolution, after Napoleon, it was very difficult. French didn't know if should they put a king back, should they go back to the Republic? What was the idea of the Republic? And there has always been, since the French Revolution, very strong opposition between the Republicans, the monarchists, and then to some extent, I mean, and that has been something that we've seen through the First Republic, Second Republic, even through 1871, 1870s, where with the wars between Napoleon III and the Prussians, again, where France lost Alsace and Lorraine, which had been gained by after the Treaty of Westphalia in the 17th century, and this was tough. So the French after that, the Republic installed, and there was some sort of, I think, Napoleon was no longer there, but the spirit of what Napoleon had built to gather the French around the idea of a nation. Because France actually is a small empire. Contrary to the Germanic people, France is an assembly of people from Corsica, Normandy, Brittany, southwest, from Provence, from the north. Each of these people has actually its own language historically. So it's not, we're not one big Germanic tribe, even if we're called the French, and the Franks were Germans. This is just the name of the conqueror of the Franks. When they arrived, I mean, century after century, they gathered all these different peoples from different horizons, different cultures, and made France a small empire within Europe. So it's quite interesting to see, because that has an impact then after on the French mentality and the way they don't see themselves maybe as, or they are not, from a historical view, a one and unique people. They are a different assembly of different people. And after, I would say, at the beginning of the 20th century, the French started seeing themselves as really French. That idea came more and more. They were before, but they were French from Normandy or from Brittany. And actually, most people would say, I'm a Briton, or I'm a Corse, or I'm a Norman. And we didn't have the communication they would have today. They didn't even have, at the end of the access to all the newspapers and the press. The elite, the educated people had. But the people, what they would say until the end of the 19th century, as it was in most of of Europe, is, okay, what's going on in my village? What's going on in my town? What's going on in my parish? That was the information. And with the evolution of the technology, with information, also schooling, which became more and more developed after the French Revolution. There was public schools before, but they were taken care of by the church. Then public schooling came. Well, there was this sense, and this was important for the Republic, that people were French. You still had that divide between I would say the Republicans, anti-Catholics, and the Catholics, which were more monarchists before the First World War. What I can say, and I think this is interesting in your analysis of the situations in pre-war. If you look at France pre-war, we still have more or less of a divided society. 30 years before, 50 years, a little less, the French were still fighting against the Germans in the 1871 war. France was still divided. And France, at that time, had this perspective of, I would say, the Industrial Revolution had started a century before. And France was a big country. It had colonies. It was a big country. As I said, it assembled all these different people of Europe. In the West, it had a nice country, nice looking country on the map, access to the Mediterranean, access to the Atlantic, colonies all over the world. However, it was being beat. It had been beat by the UK, which is the world's, who had the big superpower. Germany was on the rise, was the big competitor at that time. And France, although it was a superpower, was being beat by Germany, by the UK, and by the US. And a lot of people tend to forget that the US at the beginning of the 20th century was practically already the world's biggest superpower. The UK empire still had not crumbled, but the US was about 30% of the world manufacturing, very strong, very big country. It had already waged a lot of wars, made with South America. Make sure that was within its under its control. And France did not prepare this. And I think this is interesting in our analysis today, is that France did not see this coming. And France was living on its laurels. We used to be a strong kingdom. We were an empire. We are going to always be leaders of the world. And France didn't see that. And actually, before World War I, there was a lot of havoc. There were a lot of demonstrations in the streets. People wanted minimum wage. There were a lot of strikes. France was mainly rural. 60% of the population was agricultural. They were farmers. French people were farmers at that time, and the French politicians, did not prepare France, or maybe not as well as they should have. In hindsight, again, it's always easy to say it 100 years after. The evolution of this, of what the world, in which direction the world was going. It was living on its laurels, and actually before World War I, France was sure that if there was going to be a war with Germany, it wouldn't last long. It would be very short, that the French military was quite strong, that Germany would not be as strong, and that it would be something that the French could manage quite easily. France ended winning World War I after an alliance with the British. At the beginning with the Russian, then the U.S. came in, but after 4 years, where over 1 million French died, this was a catastrophe for France, where lots of these farmers' kids went to the battlefield. They fought, and it was a catastrophe from a moral perspective, from a historical perspective. These were extremely tough times, and it lasted 4 years. 4 years against the Germans. France didn't see that coming. They thought they were tougher. They thought that Germany could not, again, let's not forget that Germany also it's a new nation, even if the Germanics were in the Holy Roman Empire, and that they fighting with Austrians, but fighting against the Germans as they did during the Empire. In the First World War, France was quite obnoxious and thought that it wouldn't last long. France won, but it was devastated after World War I. The only thing positive for France that was created was that in those trenches, you had the Republicans, you had the monarchists, you had the Catholics, you had the
Union.
Exactly. And I would say the union around the French flag, which were blue, white, and red, was born in those trenches, where people from all across the country, whether they're from Normandy, from the north, from Alsace, for after Alsace at the end, once it was recuperated, but from the west, they fought together in the same trenches. And they came out of there, I would say, defending the French flag and this idea, they don't all have the idea of what the nation should be, what the republic should be, but they definitely did develop strong bonds.
One nation bond, yeah.
Exactly. And they were French, and they fought for that French flag, and this was a victory of the French over the Germanics, and this is something which actually helped France after that. So they were the victors after the war.
One thing that, first of all, is very interesting to have this perception that I have never had before, that France is a very mixed society. Let's use this term. I mean, in Italy here, it's very clear. You go 2, 3, 4, 5 kilometers from where I live, there is another language, another dialect, and all over Italy you have hundreds, perhaps thousands of dialects. And also Italy, as it is today, is a very young country, and I have. We have this perception that in Brazil we learned that Europe is the old continent, so, because of course we are the new continent. So we have this perception that European countries are as they are for since Jesus. Let's put it like that. And well, it's not, of course we don't learn like that, but your mind ends up thinking this has been like that forever, since forever, and it's not actually accurate. If we get even recent events, we can see the division of frontiers in the Balkans, for example, that were 20 years ago,
Yeah.
20 something years ago. I was already an adult by the time.
Yeah.
And another thing was that this creation of a census of nation. And also very important is that, well, yeah, of course, the vacuum of power that we were talking about, but the perception. I kind of missed this thought for a second, so now I got it back. This thing that France was not prepared for the change.
Yeah.
And you pass through a very I think that most of people do not understand very much that the United States is not an empire that I'm using quotes just because
It makes the understanding easier. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not an early empire. It has not risen after World War II and fallen now. I mean, in 30 years, or 40 years, or 50 years. This is it's a wrong concept. You have if you get the graph. So if you have investors, for example, if you watch some investors, they analyze the empires by the economic growth and decay, and you see that the American Empire was more or less in the same range of British Empire and all other empires in the planet, a cycle of around 200 years, more or less. And people at that time was not watching the change of hands. As I said, it's not that the British Empire was still there. It was declining. It was in free fall. But at the same time, the American Empire was rising, and at some point, the two of them crosses and there is a change of hand, which most likely we call World War II or World War I, perhaps even. And now we see again the decline of the empire of the United States, the economic empire of the United States, and the rise of the Chinese new empire. Let's use this term as well, new economic empire rising. So we are exactly more or less in the point of cross.
Exactly.
In the changing hands. It should be. I've seen some experts before all this happening. I've seen some experts predicting this to 2035 or 2050. But with the Ukraine situation, I think they speed up a little bit the situation.
It's an accelerator.
And they just full gas on, and perhaps we just dodged a bullet, and well, all of us, not just the orange man, all of us just dodged someone commented here of Franz Ferdinand moment. Coming back to France then. Another point that I found very important, that you put all the French leaders, Napoleon,
De Gaulle, Joan of Arc,
Joan of Arc, is that there is no vacuum of power. If you have a weak power, someone is going to feel this, because of course a weak power is not just someone that is weak or a no-dimensional man. Is that the society is not working accordingly. People don't care. I think that's the point. People don't care that much about the idea as they used to care about the land or the food or the prices today. And people are not willing to die for an idea. But they will if they.
They'll die for somebody else's. If you don't die for your own, you'll die for somebody else's. So
exactly. exactly. Coming back to France, then we went as far, more or less, as pre. Well, we covered a little bit of everywhere. So during pre-World War One times, we were talking about the unprepared France. How do you see this compared more or less with today? Because I also see an unprepared Europe in general for a change.
We haven't learned the lessons, and I think, I mean, the history condemns the people who don't learn the lessons from their own history. And this is a catastrophe, because if you look, I mean, if we look just before the Second World War, it's the same thing. France actually had quite a strong army, contrary to what a lot of people thought. But France didn't think that Hitler would invade. France was not prepared, and France had an army, but it didn't have that mentality. It wasn't ready to fight. And a lot of the people in France would say, well, listen, the military will fight, but we're ready. And we had this big, what we call the ligne Maginot. It's a Maginot Line, a huge fortification blocking all of the east of France. And everybody is saying Gamelin, General Gamelin, he's a very known French military. He's controlling all of this, and Germans will never come. Except that nobody thought that the Germans would come through the Ardennes. They wouldn't care at all that Belgium was a neutral country, and they would come down on France. And the French fled. And this was extremely difficult because France is a warrior nation at the beginning. The Gauls, the Celts, the Franks, and it's a country, as I said, which was built on war. It was built on alliances, but also on war. And the French were a warring nation at a moment where everybody in Europe was fighting, but the French were, I would say, on the winning side of these wars. And all of a sudden, the First World War, they died heroically, really. I mean, what happened in these, whatever the side, even the Germans or the French at that time, in hindsight, when you look at that, those wars in the trenches that we do see even today again in Ukraine, they're terrible. These are young kids in the trenches, they're hiding, and then all of a sudden these bombs coming, you know, it's a metallic storm following under, metallic thunder, killing everybody, and you're shooting somebody you don't even know. And then, so this was extremely difficult for the French, but they won at the end. And in the Second World War, in a couple of days, France abandoned, a couple of weeks, actually months, France abandoned. They fled. So this was, for a nation that has always been warring and that has been waging wars and winning wars, this was something which is, I would say, a drama. And we feel it today. And again, why did we have this? Because France was unprepared. Because before World War II, again, I think there was the trauma from the First World War, and we don't measure how deep this trauma was in the French society. You can go through any French village today, you have a monument with the names of the kids of the village who went to war, and their family commemorated them, and their generations coming after that commemorated them, and we still commemorate them today. So this was a very tough on the French society. Over 1 million kids killed in that war. And after that, the French again disagreed. So there were still a lot of monarchists, a lot of demonstrations in the streets. In the 1930s, the political, I would say, situation was extremely unstable. Monarchists, traditionalists were in the streets fighting against socialists, communists. There was a lot. These were the premises of a new revolution going on the street. The power was weak. The power didn't have a program for society, and of course, at the same time, this was fueled by lack of labor. I mean, not lack of labor, but lack of employment, difficult situation. French coming from the farmland, being told they have to go to the cities because they had to work in the factories. But I think that, again, this was a trauma for a lot of people in Europe, and that leaving the countryside to go in the factory, leaving a home, and maybe if it wasn't the nicest of homes, it was in the countryside, you had your freedom to go live in a small apartment, living on top of each other, all that. This was something that was announced and exposed as really the modern way of living, and this was something fantastic, and this is the way to go. But I think the psychological effect on these generations of farmers who left the towns, the farming, because farming is very difficult, hoping to go to gain more wealth in the cities and maybe being able to buy new clothes and be fashionable, but having to work in those factories was extremely tough. These were hardworking people in those factories, very difficult. always the same factory line, always the same view, dark, a lot of pollution, and no more contact with nature, or much less contact with nature. So I think, again, this weighed on the people of France and the rest of Europe. But France, arriving to World War II, a lot of infighting, no clear vision on which direction the French society were to go, no strong man, and the idea that the French military had everything under control. In a couple of months, we were proven wrong. Germany invaded. Half of France was controlled by the Germans, and we had to negotiate a truce, quite a humiliating truce for France, whereby the Germans would occupy Paris, the north of France, and this was extremely difficult. And to get back to what you were saying, Marcelo, that is because France, again, was unprepared. It did not have the correct information coming from the ground. It did not have a good understanding of what Nazism was about, of what Hitler was planning, of what the temperature really was in Germany, and they were extremely naive, but extremely naive, lack of information, and very obnoxious. This idea that we're the French, we're the empire, we're the descendants of Louis XIV, of Clovis, of Charlemagne, so we'll always win at the end, because that's what we've been doing for the past 1,500 years. But that's
what God meant for us.
Exactly. This is, but that stopped. That stopped brutally. And this, again, this is another trauma for the French people. And this unpreparedness and this lack of understanding of, I would say, strategy, actually something hurt France, damaged its psychology, and also the nation itself. I mean, France could have disappeared. And we're unfortunately in the same situation today. I would even say it's practically worse, because I would think that the men and women of those times were more courageous, because their life was more complicated. It was not so comfortable. Not everybody had water, just turning a faucet and having water in the rooms, or having heating, or having air conditioning, or stuff like that. I mean, we don't have air conditioning either today, all of us, but we're more accustomed to that. And these were tougher people. And it was humiliating. And for the more poor people, the only thing they had was the nation, was the country, and seeing that they felt abandoned by their elite. And if you look at today, people in the 40s, they were ready to fight. There was a resistance to France. I mean, the army wasn't ready, but there was a resistance. And even though a lot of people in the French population did very well under the Germans and were happy to collaborate, there was a resistance, a quite courageous resistance, and today, right, we don't even have. We have less of that spirit of resistance. Our political leaders are far from being anything close to Napoleon, to a Clemenceau, to Louis XIV or St. Louis, Louis IX. Very far from that. The country is still.
You're saying Macron is not Le Petit Napoleon?
Let that be our little secret. They say
I thought he was the man.
Because Napoleon was a military man, and we could think whatever we want, but he helped develop the French legal system, the constitution, a lot of the institutions we've got in France today have been started, or I would say developed under Napoleon. So he was a statesman. So he had the idea of what a state would be. He made errors, but he did a lot of things that we still have in the French culture and the French politics today. Macron was not going to leave any heritage to the French politics. If there still is a world, I should say, in the next century, I mean, he won't even be a line or maybe the one of the presidents which was responsible for plunging us into the war and wanting to pay bullies with a country with a nuclear power, which is a GDP in PPP is stronger than ours, which is one of the richest countries on the continent, and saying that we're going to go to war. You know, this is something which is, I mean, preposterous. This hurts the French image. This is giving a very bad image, and the French show this in the elections. I mean, in the latest elections, I mean, and this could be something actually quite positive, because whether the French voted more on the left or more on the right, they definitely showed that they did not like Macron, and they did not like this extreme center of I would say, an elite which is more and more perceived as being anti-social, anti-democratic, anti-people, pro-war, pro-oligarchs. And I think that with the help of the work which is being done on the internet, and just people opening up their eyes, A lot of people are starting to say, okay, wait, what are we in this country for? We're in a status of enemy. That means there's nothing more less things anyways that bind the people together. What is a nation? I mean, a nation, what is it? I mean, we've been so much divided under different consumer minorities or different sexual minorities, or even different minorities, ethnic minorities, while the countries in the West are being divided. And this is those who are above us, they've been to this divide et impera. This is the motto of empires: divide and rule. And so we've been so much divided so that people won't be ready to fight for anything, and let alone France, because people say, I'm not going to fight for France because that's not my idea of France. And at least during the First World War, they didn't agree. They said, I'm a monarchist, I'm a Republican. Okay, but we'll fight for France because we still believe in something called France. And today, this is dying out. So if France were to go to a war, I think this would be quite an easy place to take, even though we've got the biggest army in the West. I mean, if somebody's thinking about it, maybe now's the time. If everybody has a long revenge to take on France, unfortunately, it would be now. And that's quite sad, actually.
It's at the same point, at the same time, you said, well, yeah, that was something that struck me now, was that, well, yeah, we have we have the situation of immigrants in Europe all over, and these people will say, well, I myself, I would say, I ain't fighting for this. I'm sorry. I have a beautiful country back home. It's a little bit dangerous, but it's less dangerous than war. Well, most of the time. And at the same time, you have the immigrants perhaps thinking like that, I ain't fighting for this. And then you have the people from the country saying, that's not what I'm willing to fight for. Right. That's not what I see my own country. I mean, look at all these people that is not me, that is not, and I'm not being insulting to anyone or any, it's just that's going to be the perception. I mean, you have something called empathy. And what brings a country together, a society together, is empathy to one another. Correct. And when you have several mini societies that are not exactly the same and are not exactly interacting with each other, not pointing to this or that. I mean, even the inside society, the French society are not interacting to immigrants. Immigrants are not interacting with each other. And then none of them are interacting with French society. You just have division. You don't have empathy.
Exactly.
You have antipathy.
Exactly. And that's exactly it. And this is, I think, a very big disease of many Western countries. We've got no more bond. You've got no more link. I mean, and we've seen, nobody can make me believe that this is just a hazard, or else we've become extremely lazy. But if you look at French school books, you don't learn French history anymore. The kids in school books, most of them think that the world started in 1933. And that before, and that's the truth in France. So France has extremely rich history. As I said, anybody going to France is an open museum. You can't go through a village or a town without seeing something quite extraordinary, and those are the rest of history. And the French aren't even taught that. So how can you yourself assimilate to it's a superior idea of what a nation is? Not saying that it's a superior nation, but a high idea of what your nation is. If you don't know the history, the level of French language, we still have practically 20% of people in France who are considered as illiterate, that can't speak the language. So if the French don't speak their language, if they don't know their history, if they don't find this common bond, social bond, which is not just history, just the fact that you want to help each other, that you've got social security, but you're paying the social security because you're ready to help the poorest people of your country, and you know that you may benefit from that, and you've got some social bond that you would go to an association or to the public schools before there was military service, but there's no more places. The only places I think where people from different classes or horizons could meet would be in a church, because even in a football stadium, the upper classes will go to one part, the poor will go to another part, and the middle classes will be in the middle. And so there's practically nowhere where people would meet out of the population and share, common love of history, of the language, of the culture, of theater. That doesn't exist. And if you don't have that strong basis, getting back to your question on the immigrants, what do you integrate these immigrants to? They arrive in this country, and my father was an immigrant, and they arrived, and he did everything he can to teach us the language, so that we know the language, we know the culture, and where I lived, a lot of immigrants coming from Poland, from ex-Yugoslavia, from Italy, and they've all got French names today. They're all proud of their origins, but they're more French than a lot of the French. At that time, the French Republic did that. I mean, they did it so strong that, I mean, a lot of the different cultures that we had in France, the Britons, the Normans, the Corsicans, they lost a bit of their own culture, that's for now. But there was some sort of common vision of what a Frenchman was and French culture. Now that that's being lost, the immigrants arriving, and even those who would want to, how can you be, I mean, it's ridiculous if the immigrant knows the French history or even language better than the French-speaking people. So we've been divided. Everything has been done so that we can't bind, we can't feel strong feel strong again. It's not in to be another country, but strong as a nation. That means there are crises in the story, in the history of every people. The way we fight against a pandemic, against a crisis, against poverty, against maybe not tsunamis, but earthquakes or different, I would say, natural catastrophes. The way people react together as a nation, this is something which we have to go through. We don't have that. We've been divided so much today that we're getting more and more just consumers. And you're allowed to get your French flag out if the French football team is on the pitch. And this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. So we're arriving at a situation where we're speaking about more and more war. We're speaking about crisis. The economic situation in France is a catastrophe. We've got strong unemployment. The indebtedness of France is over 100, so I think it's 112%. That means we're living off money that we're just we're not even printing it ourselves, which we did in the past. We're borrowing it from the banks. So in a couple of years, the first budget will be for the French, taxpayers' money will be going to reimbursing the banks. It won't be to making better schools, better universities, better hospitals, better roads, rebuilding our cathedrals, our churches, the landscape, making society safe. It definitely won't be going into making a better justice department, police department, for France to be a safer place to be. It's going to go to the banks, and then we'll see where we can take care of that. How can that society survive? It's going to crumble. There's nothing binding the people. They're isolated, and we owe more money to the banks. We're going to be paying more to the banks than we are to hospitals or to schools, which are supposed to help us to help the society live together. And again, the situation we have now, as with World War II, as with World War I, is that our political elite are short terms. And maybe this is one of the I would say the weak spots of the French Republic, is that now, especially now, it wasn't so much the case at the beginning. We've got politicians who are elected for 4 or 5 years. So the first 2 years, they're happy, they get installed, they try to learn the tricks of the trade, understand how it works. Then they try a couple of new ideas, and then they stop because they want to get reelected. And I think also this is something we don't speak a lot about in the West. But if you look at what's going on in China, if you look what's going on in Russia, if you look at what's going on in the Emiratis, you've got people in Singapore. And I'm not all saying that these are the best regimes. Maybe I may not like to live in all these regimes. But what I must say is that the people in power have been building on a long-term process. They had a vision. This is where we are today. This is where we want to be tomorrow. We want to offer schooling. We want our countries to be safe. We want to export. I don't know, in computer chips or wheat or whatever. And they built on that. And we didn't do this. We didn't. La Fontaine is a famous French. He wrote a lot of fables, and he's inspired by Greeks, Aesop. And we have one with the ant. And I don't know how you translate seagull, but the
ant and the crickets, no?
The ant and the cricket, yeah, that's it. And so we are in that situation where French used to be ants, and they were a hardworking, hard-fighting nation, and now they've become the crickets. And this is the modern society. This is the Western society. This is the whole woke ideology, all the self-centric ideology. We talk a lot about solidarity, but we don't have any solidarity whatsoever. And so we're just, so everybody now, the big thing is getting big screens in your room, is staying inside, not going out, not meeting other people, not learning, and just being happy to be in your own, I would say, customized prison cell, because at the end of the day, that's what it comes to. And we've become that. We've become that dystopian Orwellian people that we've been warned about not to become, because we have liberté, égalité, fraternité. But we all know that this is a very bad hangover for a lot of the French, and there are more and more. This is something, maybe a positive note, who are saying, wait, we've gone down a very bad path. We are losing ourselves as a nation, as a people, and we don't even know what gets us together. The hard part is, okay, what is going to get us together? Because in the past, religion was something, the kingdom was something. Your own, I mean, even before the kingdom, you had the smaller nobility. People would feel attached to their land and stuff like that. Then the Republic had to stand for something, but now what do people stand for? And they don't have that. So we've got an elite politicians, and they're all the same. Left, most of them, from the left and the right, they're very Atlanticists. They've been through American colleges. They've been through American think tanks. They're more American than the Americans, as a matter of fact. I mean, so, and they think that the European Union is the solution to all the problems, that if you can't handle a problem today in France, it's because the European Union isn't handling the problem well. And we gave the European Union, I don't know how much, more than 50% of the legislation coming into the different European countries comes from the European Union. Nobody's responsible.
Can't do much.
You can't do anything.
You can't do much because, French people can, revolt against the French political system. But you cannot revolt against Brussels. That's war.
Yeah. They've developed the perfect system whereby they're untouchable. A bunch of people who've not been elected directly by any European people are making the rules of Western Europe. And these rules, I mean, if everyone was happy, I mean, imagine there's no insecurity. Imagine that schooling system is good, the hospitals are good. This would be a totalitarian system, but people would say, okay, it's totalitarian, but people want safety, they want security. So, okay, they're getting away with it. It's I would say it's bad for those who love liberty and freedom of speech, but okay, at least the people are getting, safer lives, or maybe more intelligent lives, or I don't know. But we don't even have that. So we've got all these laws coming out of Brussels, making life tougher, making it extremely complicated to set up a business, making it extremely complicated when you're a dedicated doctor or even lawyer trying to get your job done, because there's so much paperwork, there's so much red tape that you can't do things easily. And you always have to, at the end of the day, call some sort of a law firm or management firm, because you don't understand the laws themselves. They're so big and so long and using words that nobody uses. I mean, it's sometimes, even when you stop to think about it, this is an easy case, it's not so complicated to understand. And I think our descendants will be very harsh with us when, again, if there are any after the Third World War, which we hope to avoid, but they will be so harsh on us, because I think we are clearly the stupidest generation that has ever walked the surface of the earth. Stupidest by far.
It's true. We have everything. We have everything. We have information in the palm of our hand at light speed. Trump got shot in the United States 5 minutes later, somewhere in Pennsylvania, in the middle of a farm show or exposition, whatever. 5 minutes later, I had this in my phone. 10 minutes later, I put up a live stream.
Yeah.
That's
Incredible.
how fast we can go today. When Fitzel was shot, in 1 hour, I set up a live stream with 3 people, one from the United States, Nina, one at Donbass, an Italian also historian that works as journalist in the Donbass, called Andrea Lucidi, and Neboja, in 1 hour. I wrote to them. I said, "Let's do it. Let's pop." They popped in. 1 hour was done.
Incredible.
So that's how fast they are. And at the same time, that's why I don't believe things are happening just because of stupidity. You know, Macron is a banker. Whatever one may say about him, but he's a banker. He's been trained to be a banker. So at least he should know anything about economy, minimally anything about money. And I'm not even talking about real money. I'm talking about paper money. He should know anything about that.
Yeah.
And when you see that this crisis in Europe is ramping up for no reason, it shouldn't. The price of food, the price of electricity should not have grown one penny from 2 years ago or 4 years ago. Let's put 4 years ago. We had something in the middle as well. So it should not have grown. When I talk to Brazilians, to my friends about house loans, they go like, what? Pre 2020, pre-pandemic, it was like 0.3% a year. What's it called? Of interest rate, 0.3% a year. You could buy a house, a big house, and after 30 years, you were going to pay like 5,000 euros, not even a car.
Yeah.
For interests.
Yeah.
And now we are approaching what, 4%?
Yeah. And on 20 years, those 4%, that's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. If you go for 20 years, for 15 years, you go from a car to almost another house. Exactly. Or a small apartment, at least.
No, it is crazy. We've arrived in the situation, and I agree. It's not just stupidity. There is design behind this. There are people definitely, and we know who they are, and who have this thought that this globalist society, that this one world society, driven by, I would say, these God-given, elites who know better than us because we're too stupid to understand, and who've developed the society, and it's not working. And rather than saying, okay, stop, sorry, we made a mistake, they're continuing. And so there's this big wall in front of them all, and they're going faster. They're going faster, and everything that they have done, slowly but surely, re-engineering the society, getting us used to just consuming, getting us used to not challenging the official narrative, getting us used to get less and less better, I would say, quality out of our schools, out of our justice system, out of our hospitals. All of a sudden, they're going very fast. So they want to change the society. They closed us up. They locked us down for something that we know today has nothing to do with the Black Pest or the Black Plague. And they made us believe, and we were so docile, and we went through that, and they were playing around with us, and they tested us, and it worked. And if you look on whether it's that subject, whether it's the political situation or the geopolitical situation with, as we mentioned a couple of minutes ago, this black and white vision with the good guys on one side, and we're supposed to be the good guys. Can you imagine, of all things, the good guys and the bad guys? We're going out, and I shared this figure a couple of months ago, and it went viral on French internet, so that was quite cool. It doesn't happen all the time, but just a figure which came out of an American university, the University of Brown. It's called the Watson Institute. You probably know this figure. It's the cost of war. And it's been calculated. These guys, these are Americans, most of them in this project, and they've calculated that American wars, mainly US, but also sometimes NATO wars, since 9/11, 2001, have been the cause directly or indirectly of over 4.5 million people across the world. And when I give that figure, people are just like eye-opening. So what are you talking about? 4 million? We haven't killed 4 million. We are at the origin. 900,000 people directly. Of those 900,000, 300,000 people are civilians, and the rest indirectly, because when you impose sanctions on Iraq and you can't get medication to the kids, they die. And you can't say, oops, that's a collateral damage. There's this famous sentence from Madeleine Albright when this CBS anchorwoman says, but our war has caused over 500,000 kids to die in Iraq. Was it worth it? And Madeleine Albright says, yes, it was. This is creepy. This is really scary. This is the kind of people who are building this one world, this globalist product. And when you listen to them and when you read them carefully, it's obvious that they're bad, they don't have good intentions for us. They don't see us as normal people. They don't see whatever they're doing is, they are the Machiavellians there, and they are responsible for the death of millions of people. So this is something, this is frightening. This is the reality. And so we're still allowed, you and I, to discuss this. People will say, yeah, but you can discuss this. Yeah. But they won't give us access to mainstream media. The only thing which is positive is that this...
If we don't say some keywords here.
Yeah, exactly. We've got to be careful.
And I don't know for how long. I just told you before we go live that to brief the people that perhaps is going to watch or are watching now. I was banned. I got shadow banned for 7 days on TikTok because I was trying to pull out a video with some, technical specs of the gun that the wannabe assassin of Trump used. And 20 minutes in the middle of the live stream, 20 minutes. Shadow ban for 7 days. I got my fine on
your medal.
On TikTok. Yeah, my medal, my first medal. And yeah, that's it. 7 days. Just because I showed, projectiles and stuff. I didn't put any, grim images or gore stuff. No. I just put technical with ruled so you know the size of the bullet. Shadow ban, 1 week.
Yeah, so we have to be extremely careful because I think I see it in France anyways, and that's positive. More and more people are challenging the narrative. A lot of people who went out to vote in France recently voted for political parties who are definitely not mainstream. They're not all perfect, and the closer they get to power, the more they forget their grassroots. That's what's sad about them. But there are still some good people within these parties, even on the left and on the right. I know some on both sides, which are really good, sincere people who've got a clear vision. I mean, who've got a good vision of what they want. They want peace. They want stability in France. They want justice. And I think this is something, and they don't want all these wars. That's for sure. They don't want the Atlantis. So that's positive. A third of the French don't even go out to vote. I mean, this is to show so we go out for democracy. We fight for democracy. We don't have in democracy. People don't go out to vote. And if you look at the last U.S. presidential elections, I mean, it's a farce of what a democracy is supposed to be, with dead people voting, votes stopping at midnight, going on the following day at 6. I mean, this is ridiculous. So people are opening up their eyes, but we have to be careful because we're still allowed to say some things. We can't say everything, but one way or another, I don't know, will they shut us down or will this be too powerful for them, which I'm hoping for. Is that more and more people open their eyes and they say we have to open our eyes quickly and do something about it. And that's what I do in all my conferences here in Europe, is I say, okay, so if you agree with what we're saying tonight, and maybe if you don't agree with everything, and then we all have to do something. We have to get involved. And this is not only just in a political party. I'm telling this all the time. I mean, we have to read, we have to get informed, and we have to get involved in the social landscape, in our schools, in our parishes, in our football clubs, in the society, in the villages, because we're leaving this power out to people who think they're much smarter than us, who don't have any, I would say, long-term view of what is going on, and they're taking advantage of the system for the puppeteers who are reaping all the benefits at the end of the day. And so if we don't fight to get those places, if we don't fight to get, I would say, parts of the society which belong to us, and this doesn't mean just physical fight, going out and saying, I want to go and become part of the administration. This is possible in France, of my school, because I want to see what my kids are learning in their textbooks. I want to see what kind of ideology is being shared. What are the people invited? What kind of things are they giving out to the schools? I just want to be there because I want to say this is possible, this is not. That's power. That's a little bit of power, but that is power. And we have to get the power back, but we really have to get that power back millimeter by millimeter. We have to take it back, because if we don't do it, we're lost. We'll be in front of our big screens, watching football games, watching live, I don't know, those shows, the celebrity shows, and while we're doing that, we are going to become more and more slaves, and the situation for us or the next generations is going to be very tough. And history books have warned us about this, so we can't say, as you said at the beginning.
We hear in the channel.
Exactly. People who don't listen to you, Marcelo, they can't say Marcelo didn't tell us. I mean, that's for sure.
I'm gonna be the first one to say I told you so. A lot of people don't like to say that because it's obnoxious, but I don't care to be obnoxious every now and then. I told you so. Yeah,
That's
no, no,
exactly it.
it's let's say, because I'm Brazilian. So being Brazilian, I mean, I passed through that. A lot of things, when you talk to well, I've been to Egypt. When you talk to an Egyptian, he understands perfectly what the United States and the West does in Egypt. When you talk to a Brazilian,
Yeah.
most of us do not understand perfectly because we are in front of the screen. I don't know if you saw this old B movie called Idiocracy.
No,
And
not yet. I'll write that down.
I'll write that down because it's a B movie. It's
Uh,
not a Hollywood super production. It has Terry Crews though,
okay.
but it's a movie that it's almost like they have already predicted. The guy. The story of the movie is a guy that gets frozen in a military experiment, and something happened that they forgot about him, and then he unfreezes, like, I don't know, 200 years ahead, and the society's completely idiot, completely dumb, and he's the smart. He was a mediocre army soldier, very mediocre person, and he wakes up on this society where he's a genius, and he finds a lawyer, and the lawyer stays, the chair, the armchairs, they
Uh-huh.
already have a toilet on it,
Uh-huh.
and a beer straw, and they are already placed in front of a big screen. So basically, the guy stays there the entire day watching screens with,
Sounds familiar.
yeah, exactly, with pornography. That's also very familiar.
For sure, for sure.
And
They
yeah,
know how to control the minds and how to get the people quiet, not in the streets, and not asking themselves, okay, what am I doing here? What is my purpose in life? What is our purpose as a nation, or as a region, as a town, as a family? They've destroyed those links and bonds, and they know how to do it very well.
yeah. Well, two things. Well, we're about 1 hour 10 already. But two things that do you have another 5-10 minutes?
For sure.
Can we go? Okay. Two things that really called my attention, and we have talked about this the last time in the Winter Latina show. Which was the one thing that you mentioned was that the French society is returning to going back to churches, to the church.
Yeah.
Well, of course, I don't imagine it's the vast majority of society, but slowly going back. And this is something that, when we see those pictures, I don't remember if we mentioned this on that program. When you see those memes on the internet about, Iraq or, Iran, and you see, oh, this was Iran before the revolution, and you see women in bathing suits and all that, and then you sit fast forward, they just don't put in the middle what happens there, which is the radicalization of society by wars, by invasion of foreign cultures, exactly by the bikinis. Let's put it
for sure.
grossly like that. And when I see, there's a comedian, a French comedian, that he does comedy in Brazil. I don't think he's a very good comedian in France, but he's amazing comedian in Brazilian
what's
type
his name?
of. His name is Polka Bands.
Polka Bands. I'll check that out too.
Polka Bands. But he does it in Portuguese.
Okay.
And I say he's excellent doing Brazilian comedy in Portuguese, with a French perspective. And he said a couple of times that when he was young, his mother didn't allow him to go to McDonald's or to go to Disneyland because, that is a subculture, American subculture. So he says that, I only came to McDonald's, I was already old, and I still don't go because I don't like it that much. And I remember I told you last time that when I was living in France, in what's the name of the city? The name of the guy? Fernand Voltaire.
Yeah, exactly. Fernand Voltaire, next to the Swiss
Fernand
border.
Voltaire. Exactly. So I have a French friend. He's from Alsace-Lorraine.
Okay.
But I remember in the city, I remember it was a couple of years ago, so of course I remember. In the city, there was this street market, and every weekend it was packed of people just going there for the vegetables, the cheese, the this. It was more packed of people there than the supermarkets usually were.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was really, there was this guy that was cutting charcuterie called Pierre
Yeah.
de Buret and all. It was very, very French.
Yeah.
That was my impression as an outsider. That was very French. People are not doing a huge line to go to Burger Kings or McDonald's.
Yeah.
They were making huge lines to buy their olive, the cheese, their fresh vegetables, the meat from the butcher, not from the supermarket. And that was one of my first perceptions when I arrived in Europe, that I was living there. It was that street market was very important. It was very full of culture. And even in Europe in general, even here in Italy, they see a lot of cultural celebrations that I had no idea, but they look very medieval, medieval dances, medieval suits, and that's interesting. I hope they at least they're trying to keep alive this memory.
Yeah. And you're right to mention that, Marcelo, because actually there is something quite special happening today in Europe, and I'm not pessimistic. Actually, I am an optimistic, but the big picture today is just quite bleak. But definitely in France, there's something going on. That's for sure. Talking about people going back to church for the first time last year, the number of people getting baptized has increased, and a lot of these are adults, because we're arriving in a society which doesn't believe in anything. So people are lost, and so they're looking for something, and they've seen all the TV shows, they've been to all the games, they've tried anything which exists with modern society, and they don't find satisfaction, and they're missing something. So a lot of people are going back to God, in France in any case last year, and it's also happening at the same time in the Muslim community. So this could be actually something quite nice, but actually quite problematic at one stage, because a lot of the immigrants' children which were born in France are actually, if you go in some of the major cities, it's not the people coming from Africa, which are wearing the headscarves and all that. It's a lot of the people who are born in France, because they themselves are looking for this. They're not satisfied with the French culture. They're not satisfied with what they're finding, and they're going to the religion that their own parents sometimes fled or don't. So there is this quest for God, for religion in the French society globally, and it is interesting from a Catholic point of view, or from a Christian point of view, because it is linked to more traditional ways of living. And it is so, for example, fasting in France was something which is unheard of maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So probably a lot of sports gurus who went through that. But now, for example, in Orthodox society, fasting is still something which is extremely strong. But it's coming back in the Catholic Church, fasting. That means doing some sort of ascetic view on religion, and not just going to church on Sunday and being a hypocrite the rest of the week. So there is that. I mean,
I'm sorry, that was good.
So there is this quest of something more essential to life, which is quite interesting. There are a lot of traditions, as you say, those food markets work very well. There's a whole thing we call localism. That means we buy local. And it's funny because conservatives, right-wing and left-wing people align on this. Left-wings, because they're saying, okay, we're protecting the environment. We don't need our tomatoes coming from Zimbabwe or from Tajikistan. We can have them ourselves. And the conservatives are saying, listen, we want people from our village. We want to give them our money before we give them to the supermarket, before we give them to the people from Tajikistan or whatever. So it's quite interesting, and people are getting again. This is creating some bond, because you're going out to the farmer. So, for example, I go buy maybe not most, but a lot of the food directly to the farmer. And this is something quite new in France. This is actually something quite exciting. The yellow vests, which is, a fantastic movement. I've never seen this anywhere else. And at a time where there is Trump, Brexit, and all this stuff, but the yellow vests, these were 100% grassroots. No ideology, no political strings. It actually died out when the politicians and the official unions came in. just French people across the political border, believers, non-believers, atheists, Catholics, whatever, Protestants, they would just say, listen, we're having difficulties making ends meet. And there's a French geographer called Christophe Guilly. He's quite known, and he's saying what most of these people wanted, actually, it wasn't even so much extra purchasing power. They just wanted to exist. They want to exist in the political spectrum. They're not represented by the elites. They're proud. He said they're treated as fascists or as stupid people because they haven't had superior education. They just want to exist. Yes, they're proud of being French. They're proud of their traditions. They're proud of their cultures. They want a piece of the cake, and they want to live and exist as a people. And this was a very strong comment. And I've been to different demonstrations during those yellow vests, and it was amazing. It was amazing because people had this social bond. They were discussing, people were playing instruments, they were drinking beers or drinking water, whatever. They were going to they were controlling the streets, you know. It's actually quite funny. On the motorways, they would stop the barriers and they said it's free for everybody. This cost the motor companies billions and billions of euros. It was quite strong. It was massive. And there was some violence because there's a violent sentiment today in France. People are very upset. They are extremely upset, and the fact that there's this return to the tradition. Again, I'm getting back to the religious aspect, which is I think quite interesting. But there's a pilgrimage in France between Paris and Chartres. There's about 100 kilometers between both, and I don't know, a couple, maybe 10 years, 20 years back, there was like 7,000 people going there. There were more than 20,000 this year people. So that's walking 3 days in a row, discussing, having fun, taking a couple of drinks, but also praying, but also stuff like that. Things you'd think they'd be taken out of the Middle Ages. You know, there had been video. If there were videos in the Middle Ages, you say, okay, this is what I would have seen. Well, this is today, and a lot of young people, and it looks like they were having a blast, actually. So, and so away from the screens, away from this modern society, and this is, I think, if there's one country which can maybe not lead, but at least be some sort of create some sort of dynamic to stop this globalized world, this consumerist world, this consumerist society. France can help in that. It's not going to be easy, but there are a lot of very interesting things happening along in France. And I know in other European countries, but France is actually getting strong, and it's worrying the establishment. So I think that's actually quite good, so that they start saying that, okay, you can call these guys whatever they want, whatever you want. They don't care. They're going to the streets. They're building their parallel society. That's what they're doing. And I find that from an intellectual and societal point of view actually quite very interesting.
Yeah, no, that's you know, when I came here, well, after traveling a little bit around Europe, I came to a conclusion that the European, of course, the French is French, the Italian is Italian, the German is German, but the European have a perceive of European. You know, if you go to Portugal, if you go to France, if you go to Spain, if you go, all the peoples they say I'm European. You know, they're going to say that in common. Well, that was my first impression. Today, I think we're sitting on a powder keg, but
there are.
But yeah, you mentioned this. So Italy, for example, I just have the same impression about Italy. You know, Italy it's a country that keeps the you know, the small farmers alive. You know, the winemakers and the tradition in the families. You know, you have as a Brazilian, in Brazil we eat a lot of industrial things, you know, industrialized things here. So every family, I mean, I remember when comes the time of the year, you know, of crops and killing the pig and things like that. It's always a time that in the work, everybody was bounding. Almost every week, someone was bringing fruits for the farm. The other family was making, you know, charcuterie, salami, things like that. And I had a colleague that her family was making balsamic.
Okay, wow. That's fantastic. Yeah.
That's something that I would not imagine someone would do in inside their house. I would imagine something with a big industry of balsamic and stuff like that. So yeah, there is still a wine. People do their own wine. Their one. So there's still a lot of this micro. There's not exactly a micro entrepreneur because it's a family thing. But it's the kind of thing that, during a crisis time, people can just go back to that and be fine,
Exactly. You've nailed it. And this is, I think, also something people are looking to rebuild some human links. There are the spiritual links and then there are human links, because they sense that if the times really get tough, I mean, people are going to be killing each other in the supermarkets, those who go to the supermarkets. Those who got their network.
the toilet paper?
That was crazy. At that time, I wanted to build a spaceship and leave the Earth. I said, I got to get away. I have nothing in common with these guys. But people are looking again for these networks. There's interesting. I think also that's very interesting that you underline that. They like these networks. It's something. It's back to nature. It's back to the basics. It's being generous. It's not buying and stuff like that. And it's also surviving, because if we really do go to something very terrible, wars, bigger crises, or you will have to eat at one way or another. So you'll have to be protected. Believe me. I mean, I've been through the Yugoslav wars, and nobody would have thought a couple of years before that we'd go through a civil war. And in a couple of days, you have to choose your side, or actually your side is chosen for you. It goes very quickly. And people think that, again, this that can happen to us. And I will remind again what we said at the beginning of this discussion, what Thucydides, he said, is that the peace is it's an interval between the war period. It's an armistice. So the normal period is war. So we're lucky enough not to have been through wars, but they can come back, unfortunately. I mean, even with the nuclear power, whether there's war between nations or civil wars, that can be possible as well. It's important to have the family bonds, the friends, the relationships, the neighborhood. A lot of people in the different votings, we saw that people from the countryside and people from the cities just didn't vote at all the same way. And I work in the city and I work in the countryside, and really sometimes I wonder if I don't have to take a passport to go from the town to the city, or vice versa, because there's just not the same French. It's not the same people. And so, and not a lot of people more and more are looking for these, it's not maybe slower, but more closer, more humane relationships, something more secure also. And just, and you're very right to underline that also, that food security, and that security that you find with having better relationships, just saying hi to the people. Where I live, people speak to each other. And I'm in the city, you can just walk into a building, into the elevator, nobody's going to say hi. Or on the countryside, if you're crossing the road, you don't know that person, but you say hi. There's just another mentality, and when more and more people are looking for that, because it's more authentic.
Yeah. I really think that that there's nothing better to finish this episode than this, and let's hope for that. Do you think there would be anything that you would put on the table that we might have forgotten to talk about at this time? I don't
think so, and I really do thank you for giving the opportunity to discuss this on the French, and even do a little bit of homework before, to find out that this lack of foresight on the French behalf, the fact that we live on our laurels, that we don't. This is something which has damaged France a lot, and I'm also happy that we ended up on a positive note, because we have to get out of this. It's all done. We're all going to die and stuff like that. I mean, we've seen in the history of France and in so many countries, at one moment, that instant, you take advantage of that position, you can change the situation. That's what de Gaulle did in the Second World War. That's what Joan of Arc did. And that's why they're heroes today, because just that one person can change a lot. And even if we don't aspire all to be a de Gaulle, a Joan of Arc, or whatever, we are all these ants working and we've got to be working, and out of us, somebody will come and help. And if that person doesn't come out, we're just, the fact that we're working and that we're trying to build a better world ourselves, rather than counting on people who we vote for. If we all do that, we'll make this world a better place to live. That's for sure.
That's for sure. Let's hope we can sparkle some Neil de Gaulle or Joan of Arc.
Who knows?
Who knows? Someone watching the IDM, remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment if you want to be the next de Gaulle. And Nicola, I imagine it's Nicola, right?
Yeah, exactly, Nicola. Yeah.
Nicola, I thank you very much for your presence again today, and
Thank
it's
you, Marcelo.
amazing that the door is always open. I have coffee and cake on the table.
All right, same
you
here.
can come back as long as you wish, every time you wish, and let's have some fun another time. And
For
today
sure. It would be my
was a
great pleasure.
It was a great program. Thank you, everybody. I wish you
Cheers.
all a good afternoon. And later tonight, I'll have the discussion, but then in Portuguese with Hugo Dionísio, talking about the axis of the new world. See you guys. Thank you, Nicola. See you.
Au
Bye
revoir.
bye.
See you.
Au
Cheers.
revoir, monsieur. À la
Au
prochaine.
revoir.
Bye bye.